Yo, what's going on everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video, and today we're going to be counting down the 6 most sought after kinds of Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Now, I'm not going to be listing 6 specific Pokemon for you to go after, rather, I'm going to be talking about 6 different categories of Pokemon that are often considered the most wanted in the game. These are Pokemon that are incredibly valuable, and they're going to either elevate your gameplay or award you with a lot of bragging rights. The reason for that is because every single one of the Pokemon that I'm going to be talking about are extremely difficult for you to get. But if you do happen to get them, you're definitely going to be able to brag to your friends that you have some of these in your collection. Alright, so with that said, let's dive right into it. So the first most sought after Pokemon in Pokemon Go is a little bit obvious, and it's probably going to be the easiest to get out of all the Pokemon that I'm going to be talking about. And that is, of course, 100% IV Pokemon. These are Pokemon that have a stat line of 15 attack, 15 defense, and 15 health when you appraise them. And they are extremely difficult for you to find. Sure, there are certain Pokemon that you could get very easily just through raid battles, egg hatching, and field research, considering that the rate at which you can get 100% IVs are going to be much higher for those methods, but when you catch a 100% IV in the wild, it's definitely an event because it's extremely difficult and it's extremely rare for you to come across them naturally. I do know that there's going to be a lot of players out there who have a huge, robust collection of 100% IVs. Typically, they get those through some illegitimate means like spoofing or using maps. But overall, coming across a 100% IV is extremely difficult, and some players go entire years without ever coming across one. But if you ever happen to get yourself a good amount of 100% IV Pokemon, well, you're going to have a lot of Pokemon to brag about, because regardless if it is meta relevant or not, coming across a 100% IV is usually a really cool experience, regardless of what that Pokemon is. Now, this leads me to the second most sought after Pokemon in Pokemon Go, and that is, of course, Perfect IV Legendaries. Yeah, these are very much sought after because of how important they are for stuff like the Master League and raid battles and gym attacking. A lot of these legendaries are really good, but they're even better as 100% IVs. Unfortunately, there's no bad luck protection in Pokemon Go, so you just need to do a whole bunch of raids if you want 100% IV legendaries. And sometimes you may go entire years without ever coming across one. I think out of about 3,000 legendary raids that I have done, I only have about 7 legendaries that are perfect IV, and those are all obtained through raids. Sure, I have more 100% IV legendaries, but most of those I got through lucky trades, but just getting them from raid battles is really rare. I think the rate at which you can get it is like 1 in 256. Like, it's pretty insane. That means out of 200 or so raids, you might come across one, but it's really going to vary because that rate is for every single raid that you do. So you might end up doing thousands of raids and never coming across a 100% IV. That means if you ever do come across one, yeah, it's something you should definitely keep, regardless of what that legendary is. And there are certain legendaries that if you were to get a 100% IV of that Pokemon, it's going to be really valuable for the Master League. Namely, Pokemon like Dialga, Groudon, Kyogre, Giratina, Mewtwo. These are awesome Pokemon for the Master League. And if you happen to get them at 100% IV, you should definitely max them out. Alright, so this leads me to the third most sought after Pokemon in Pokemon Go, and it is of course going to be another Perfect IV Pokemon, and that is Perfect IV Shadow Pokemon. These are some of the hardest hitting Pokemon in Pokemon Go, bar none. The Shadow bonus is incredibly powerful, considering that let's say you have a 0% IV Shadow Pokemon, it's still going to hit a lot harder compared to a 100% purified or regular version of that Pokemon. That's just how valuable the Shadow bonus is. Now imagine you have a 100% IV stat line on top of that Shadow bonus. Suddenly, that Pokemon is incredible. This is pretty much going to be the absolute best version of that Pokemon from a raid attacking point of view. And in some cases, even in the Master League and Ultra League as well. You should also keep in mind that getting yourself a 100% IV Shadow Pokemon is probably going to be a lot more difficult than getting a natural 100% IV Pokemon or even a 100% IV Legendary from a raid. Yeah, so if you ever come across a 100% IV Shadow, definitely hold on to it, especially if it is a shiny. Alright, so moving along, let's move on to the fourth most sought after kind of Pokemon, and this is of course going to be the Galarian legendary birds. These are Pokemon that currently only spawn from the daily adventure incense, and in most cases, they often draw a Master Ball from the player. Why is that? Well, every single Galarian legendary bird, namely Articuno, Moltres, and Zapdos, they all have an incredibly low catch rate as well as an incredibly high flee rate. This means if you do not catch it on the first ball, chances are it is going to run away. That means you will need to use a Master Ball in order to guarantee that you catch it. And in most cases, some players will argue that it's not a good use of your Master Ball, mainly because the IVs of that Galarian legendary bird is likely to be bad. But I still think it's worth it because these birds are not only at a super low spawn rate from the daily adventure incense, they are extremely difficult to catch. So if you ever come across one, you should definitely use your Master Balls because these are some of the most sought after Pokemon in the game. And they're definitely going to draw a lot of trades as well. Alright, so we're moving on to number 5, and this one's going to be a little bit more niche, but I think if any player were to get them, they are going to be incredibly valuable, regardless if you PvP or not. So, the fifth most sought after Pokemon that I wanted to talk about is, of course, legendary Pokemon with Great or Ultra League PvP IVs. Having legendaries with PvP IVs is basically like a cheat code when it comes to the Great League or Ultra League, depending on the Pokemon. Like for example, if you get yourself a Registeel with rank 1 IVs, you're going to have a much easier time getting to the higher ranks within the Great League, and yeah, it's really crazy just how much of a power difference it is having legendaries with PvP IVs. Some legendaries and mythicals might be okay without PvP IVs, but really, if you can get yourself something close to the rank 1 IVs of that Pokemon, you're going to just do so much better in PvP. Some of the notable examples are, of course, like Registeel, Deoxys Defense form, there's Cresselia, and then when you go into the Ultra League, there's Giratina Altered form, the Swords of Justice Pokemon, Virizion and Cobalion. All of these Pokemon are going to be really good if you have PvP IVs for them. But herein is the tricky part. Getting yourself PvP IVs on legendaries and getting them to a CP that's lower than the minimum requirement is actually pretty hard because you basically need to do mirror trades with the player that you haven't had on your friends list before. And that's essentially the only way you could potentially get a PvP IV on a legendary. And also keep in mind that you can only do 1 or 2 special trades per day, depending on whatever the event bonuses are. Yeah, it's really hard to get yourself PvP IVs for legendaries, and if you happen to ever get them, you should definitely hold on to them because those are Pokemon that are going to add a lot of value to your account. And before we get into the final most sought after kind of Pokemon that I wanted to talk about, let me give you a brief honorable mention. And this is going to be kind of interesting, but there are actually players out there who are looking for Nundos. Now, what is a Nundo? Well, basically, just like perfect IVs are 15 attack, 15 defense, and 15 health, a Nundo is a Pokemon with 0% IVs. And in most cases, it's actually a lot more difficult to get yourself a 0% IV of a Pokemon compared to getting a perfect IV. The Pokemon cannot be under any kind of weather boost, you can't have any kind of IV floor, and it's really just going to be sheer luck. If you ever get yourself a Nundo, it's going to do nothing for you from a gameplay point of view. It's not going to be good in PvP, it's not going to be good in raid battles, but essentially it's going to be a rare gem for your account. So if you ever come across a 0% IV, you should definitely save it because there's going to be some players out there who are going to envy you for having that Pokemon. Alright, so with that said, let's go over the last category of Pokemon that I wanted to talk about for this video in particular. Yeah, the most sought after type of Pokemon in the game is of course going to be Shundos. What are Shundos? Basically, they're perfect IV Pokemon that are also shiny. These are incredibly difficult for you to get, and regardless of whatever that Pokemon is, it's definitely worth bragging about. I have myself about, I think 27 or 28, I actually think I might have 30 Shundos on my account. And in order to get them, I had to jump through so many hoops. A lot of them just involved a lot of lucky trading, but a lot of them also required me to be in a community with a lot of 100% IV callouts during community days. But yeah, there was a point where I really wanted a whole bunch of Shundos and I just went for it. And once I got my first Shundo, which was a lucky 100% IV shiny Rayquaza, After that, I started to see more and more Shundos come out. I think that's really what it comes down to. You need to find your first Shundo, and the rest of the Shundos start to roll in. I think these are some of the most satisfying moments in Pokemon Go, getting yourself a Shundo. So hopefully you'll be able to experience it because, yeah, they are some of the most sought after Pokemon in the game. They're actually not that difficult if you think about it. Just do a whole bunch of lucky trades and only strictly do shinies when you do lucky trades, and eventually you'll get yourself a Shundo. That's probably the easiest way you could do it. Yeah, Shundos are definitely by far the most sought after Pokemon type in Pokemon Go. But yeah, in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Now, there's definitely going to be different types of Pokemon that some players will value more than others. If there is a particular kind of Pokemon that you think should have been on this list, definitely mention it in the comments section down below. Also, brag about some of the Pokemon that you have among all of these different kinds of Pokemon. I would love to hear it, so make sure you share them in the comments. And yeah, thank you so much for making it to this point in the video. If you ended up enjoying it, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And also don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And as always, I want to give a shout out to all my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the Jinsula channel, go and check out my Patreon. Click on the links down below. And if you become a paid Patreon member, you get a permanent spot on my in-game Pokemon Go friends list. So if you want to play Pokemon Go with me, like with remote raids, make sure you go and check out my Patreon. And if you want to support my channel in a different way, you can do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula, and I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. And that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.